Travel planning can be daunting, especially when it's a multi-destination international trip. The sheer number of things to consider can get very overwhelming, and speaking from experience, sometimes this overwhelm starts overshadowing the excitement you may feel about the trip. Not a great way to start off a vacation. The overall goal of this travel planner template is to minimize overwhelm when it comes to trip planning by guiding you through each step of the travel planning process in an intuitive way without making each step feel overly complicated. At first glance, my Notion travel planner template is very basic. It's a very simple layout, but that is by design. I need function over form for this task. I have watched a lot of YouTube videos over the years about how other people set up their Notion travel planners. And so I don't think anything I'm doing here is revolutionary, but I feel like it's somewhat more realistic than many of those elaborate but super cool Notion travel planners. Honestly, I tried doing what a lot of these other people are doing, which is to build a comprehensive web of databases focused solely on travel that cover every step of the travel planning process, from dreaming about visiting a destination to the actual planning, to having a trip page that serves as somewhat of a base camp during the trip, and also housing journal entries from the trip. I tried that and I just couldn't keep up with it because, call me lazy, I feel like it was just too much work, especially once the trip has started. Once I'm in vacation mode, I'm not going to go out of my way to do complicated Notion tasks. I love Notion, but I want to see things in the world other than my Notion database. And when I get home from the trip, I'm kind of ready to move on, ready to get back to work, ready to start planning another trip. What I don't want to do is continue fussing about a trip that has already passed. That being said, Notion is a really great tool that has kept me organized and on track and motivated in everyday life. So it behooves me to figure out a way to create a system related to travel that makes things as frictionless as possible so that I will actually continue to open up and use Notion even while I'm traveling. And that brings me to the purpose of this particular travel planner template and how I use it. Unlike other Notion travel planner setups where the user will refer back to the trip page during the trip, for the most part, this is for me just a planning tool. I use it to plan everything related to the trip, brain dump ideas, and manage my pre-travel tasks. But once the trip starts, I'm pretty much gone. I don't like that that's the case, but it is what it is, and I'm not gonna force myself. So in a nutshell, what this template does is it gives me a place to organize my thoughts and get all of the details of the trip ironed out. But then, more importantly, it provides all of the tools that I need to integrate all of the trip information into my everyday agenda setup so that everything interconnects behind the scenes. And therefore, I don't have to completely upend my typical Notion usage while I'm traveling. I can just continue to use it how I normally use it, and all of the trip plans will be integrated into my everyday setup. With that, I'm going to show you my entire Notion travel planner template, explain how everything works, and so you can see how it helps me stay organized when I'm planning trips. So let's get into the template. The first thing you'll notice at the top here is a place for a countdown widget. There are a lot of places where you can make these for free and embed them. I keep this here to remind me to set up the countdown when I have the final trip dates, but obviously I wouldn't have that when I'm first starting out, so I'll skip over this for now. But it's a fun thing to look at as the trip approaches. I like keeping most sections behind these toggle headings because I like to think of them like drawers. I open the drawer when I want to use something, and then I can put it away when I'm done, and it overall just keeps things looking neat. It helps me focus when I can just look at what is relevant in the moment and nothing else. First thing, I have a section called Language and Culture. And when I open this up, you'll see two simple sections. Key phrases is where I will write down how to say basic words in the local language so that I can study before I leave. And culture notes is where I will jot down little quirks about the culture that I want to be aware of, such as how in Japanese culture, people use bows in the same way that an American would use a smile and wave. Nothing too much happens here. The next section is the most unwieldy, but sometimes you just need a safe space to be messy. Basically, this is where I brain dump all of my thoughts and ideas when I just need to get it down where I can see it all in one place. Same as before, I have these 5 main categories behind toggle headings, so I can focus on just one thing at a time. If I'm visiting multiple destinations in the same trip, I'll create another layer of toggles within the toggles to separate my notes by destination. This doesn't need to be super neat and aesthetic, it's just where I compile all of my random thoughts. Don't worry, we'll clean things up later. The first thing we like to figure out when planning a trip is the flights. Flights can be very expensive, so we try to spend the time combing through the options. We will adjust dates, times, routes, and sometimes destinations in order to get to a price that we like. With that comes a lot of scribbling, and so I like to have a place where I can just jot down every option I can think of and then work through them until we settle on something. Next is accommodations. Same things apply here. Hotels are another big expense, so I like to collect options here until I'm ready to lock one down. The main thing that we're looking for in a hotel is that it is close to a train station or a bus stop. We prefer not bus stop, but if that's what we can do, then fine, a bus stop. But it has to be serviced by a line that we would want to ride on our most tiring day. What does that mean? So here's an example. We went to Tokyo recently and we stayed in the neighborhood Hachibori. Among all of the neighborhoods that people say you should stay in Tokyo, Shinjuku, Shibuya, Asakusa, Ueno, Hachibori was not on anybody's list of a good place to stay. But we knew that we wanted to go to Tokyo Disney. And as you know, Disney days are long and tiring. And of all of the days that we would want the easiest commute possible, that was going to be the day. So we picked Hachibori because it is on the Keio line, which is the line that would take us straight to Disney and straight back without any transfers. With this in mind, we looked at all of the stops along the Keio line and picked one based on a balance of 4 factors. Number 1, walking proximity to other interesting areas. Hachibori is within walking distance of the Tsukiji Fish Market and Tokyo Station. Number 2, is it a safe neighborhood? Number 3, are there good train connections from this station that can easily get us to other parts of town? And number 4 is price. We're not made of money. Hachibori ticked all of these boxes for us, and so it was perfect. And so that is how we choose accommodations. Next up is ground transportation. This includes, airport transportation as well as any trains between cities, ferries maybe, and of course the local public transit around the city. In this section, like the flight section, I will write out all of the components that we'll need and figure them out systematically. We will learn how to use the public transit, how to pay as you go, or if we need to buy passes. And we'll have a look at the lines to see where we can go directly from our stop and generally how to get to other parts of the city. Public transit is the default option, but sometimes we have to use rideshares, and we like to know the likelihood of that before we arrive. Uber, obviously the preferred option. We've used Grab before, it works fine. I don't think Lyft is international, but we use it domestically. But we avoid traditional taxis at almost all costs. Next is destination logistics. Definitely the least fun section, but it has to be done. This is where I'll figure out if there are any specific entry requirements, immunizations, documents, etc. And if there are, I'll make sure to add it to the itinerary so that I don't forget. For cell phone usage, we have an international data plan, so we don't have to think about this for each trip. But if you don't have that, you can look into purchasing a physical SIM at your destination or using an eSIM. I also look into the local money system. Do they like cash? Are credit cards widely accepted? Good to know so you can plan accordingly. And also laundry. Something I like to consider when deciding how many clothing items to pack is the laundry situation at the destination. For example, if your destination is in a major city and you're going on your own, uninhibited by a tour group schedule, then it's relatively easy to find a place to do your laundry. So I may be comfortable packing a little less because I know I can wash as needed. However, if I'm going to a tourist trap destination like Vegas, convenient laundry at a reasonable price will be very difficult to come by. And so even if I'm going to Vegas for like only 5 or 6 days, I'll still pack my full travel capsule that is good for 2-ish weeks with some minimal hand washing just to be safe. Last up is the activities brainstorm. This is definitely the most fun section. This is a catch-all section where I will just jot down any ideas for things to do or food to eat or places to go. I'll just put it all here. For the most part, I'm getting these ideas from TikTok and YouTube and adding them on my phone. So I like having a convenient place to throw all of the ideas without having to worry about organizing and categorizing just yet. The next big section is maps. This is where I will embed a Google map of the exotic and interesting cities I'm visiting. Just kidding. This is Hilo. I like having the map embedded mainly because it provides a nice visual on the page and it feels travel-y. But really, I add the maps here as more of a convenient link and a reminder that I have pins saved in my Google Maps account. I like to do that because I like seeing all of the pin drops in one place, and it's helpful when grouping activities by proximity. The pins don't show up in the embedded map, which is disappointing, but I'm usually doing this on desktop before the trip, so I can just use a separate window. So again, it's more of a pre-planning helper than a tool that I use while I'm there. I take that back. This is definitely going to be the most interesting section. It is the itinerary section. This is the most fun for people who really like to plan and organize, and that is definitely me. As you can probably imagine, my planning section is a hot mess by the time I'm ready to start my itinerary. And like I said earlier, I am not going to be referring back to that disaster while I'm traveling. This database here is a linked view of my and the husband's shared calendar. So everything that goes in here is going to be visible to both of us conveniently. What I'm doing here is building my trip itinerary into our regular calendar. And so when the day comes, the trip events start popping up in the exact same manner as do the reminders to mow the grass and go to Costco and whatever else. It doesn't miss a beat, and we didn't have to do anything special. It just works. I have 3 different views set up here: a table view, a calendar view, and a second table that I call share, and I'll go through each of them and show you what I use them for. All of them are filtered so that everything that I add from the trip is linked back to this same travel planner page, and those relations are what help keep me organized when I have so many different categories of life funneling into the same calendar database. First thing I like to do in this table view is add a calendar event that spans the length of the trip. This is going to act as a parent event for all of the following itinerary items, and that way each individual event is labeled with the trip name. And so it's easy to see at a glance on the calendar what a specific event is referring to, and you'll see how that looks in a bit. So I'm going to create an event and select an emoji and set the dates, and then open the toggle so I can see all of the sub items. And you can see over here that the parent event automatically links back to this particular trip page. There are many of these little things that occur behind the scenes that help keep things organized without you having to put any brain power into making that happen. And that's what I love about Notion. Next, you may have noticed these buttons down below the database. These buttons duplicate checklists with tasks that I do to prep for each trip. When I click the button, my checklist appears, and I can simply drag the tasks into the database. I set the appropriate dates, and all of my pre-travel tasks show up in order on my main calendar, even if I don't actually visit this page every day. I have them organized by time frame, and I will enter each list as sub-items under the corresponding heading. So I'm going to do that for this trip now. Most of these are standard things that people do before they leave the house, and you can pause to read and copy them if you are interested. The one interesting item is this one that says update daily agenda and journal, set travel journal to auto-populate. I have a daily journal database that automatically creates a fresh daily agenda every single day. I don't have to do anything, it's just there and ready for me to use every day. And it helps keep me on track because I have like my everyday tasks right in front of me. I don't have to think about it. I have a journal page. It helps me a lot. However, my daily agenda template is very much geared towards everyday life mundanities. It reminds me to get my steps in and drink water and stay on task with work and wash the dishes. All of these things that I don't want to look at when I'm on a trip. When I'm on a trip, I just want a clean page where I can write and journal freely and upload pictures. So I created a separate travel journal template that I can set to auto-populate every day during the vacation. It encourages me to journal about the trip in real time because it's convenient. I'll show more about this later when I get to the journal section of the travel planner. But now that I have all of my pre-travel tasks sorted and scheduled, I'm going to start working on my actual trip itinerary. First thing I'm going to do is add my flights, very important. I'll name the event using the flight route and flight number. So a quirk about Notion that, as far as I know, cannot be changed, is that there's no way to have the start time and end time of an event occur in 2 different time zones, which would be an essential function if you want to have a flight as a continuous event for most flights. Since that doesn't work, instead, I'll just add in 2 separate events, one for the departure of the flight and one for the arrival, and set the appropriate time zones for each one separately. So unless a flight starts and ends in the same time zone, in that case, I'll do one event. So that's actually what I'm doing here. But there's another problem that doesn't actually apply in this example. Even when you manually switch the time zone of an event, Notion automatically converts the time that you enter and displays it in your current time zone. So let's say I have an event taking place in Pacific time zone, which is 3 hours ahead of where I am. If I write in the time as the correct time in the Pacific time zone, it'll actually show up 3 hours behind that time. It'll show the time converted to my time zone. So when you do arrive in the time zone that you selected for that event, the time will show up correctly. But it's a nuisance when you're trying to plan ahead. Maybe somebody has a formula that can fix this, but for now, what I do is I added this text column that I call local time. Here, I just type in the date and the time that I want to see. It's the same as what I entered in the date property. I select the time zone. That way this little label shows up, letting me know that this time is in the intended time zone. So while I'm planning days, these are the times that I'm referencing. I'll set the description of the event from the select menu. Here I'm selecting flight. And lastly, I will upload any documents that I have relating to the event, such as confirmations or tickets. I'll do the same with my hotel information, with listings for the check-ins and checkout times, upload documents, and select accommodation. This assignee column is how I filter which items show up on my calendar, my husband's calendar, or both. I will select both of us so we can both see these events, but I'm not going to do that now because it shows our full names and I don't feel like redacting things. Next, I'm going to switch over to the calendar view and start scheduling the more flexible events. The calendar view just makes it very easy to drag events around and see how everything fits together. It's just a nice visual. The first thing I do when I come in here is to update my filters. I haven't figured out how to link the parent task that I just made as an automatic filter, so I just do it manually and it's not that big a deal. I already have the filter selected and parent task contains, and here I'll search for the parent task page, my name, and link it. Now I can just go crazy adding events in here and making sure that when I set the times for the events, I set them in the appropriate time zone. I also try to fill in the local time property as I go. It's kind of cumbersome. It's an extra step, but it's incredibly helpful being able to see it immediately. And I don't mind doing these annoying things while I'm still home so that when I'm off, I don't have to worry about them and things are just easier. I never complete the itinerary in one sitting. This is a work in progress that I will start about a month or so before the trip, and I'll continue poking at until it's pretty much the day before we depart. What I like to do is organize a simple idea list in the parent task page, not in the property, just in the page. And I basically copy and paste all of the leftover ideas for activities and food that didn't specifically make it into the itinerary, but I don't want to completely forget just in case we do have time. This event page will be front and center for the duration of the trip because of how my daily calendar is sorted. So it's just a convenient place to put all of the extras in a place where I'm likely to reference. The last view I have is Share. This is a view that I have specifically filtered to only show the main components of the trip, which are flights, accommodations, and ground transport. I have this one for sharing with anybody who needs to see it. Family, basically. I don't always do this, but sometimes if the trip is complicated and it's hard to explain where I'm going, there are too many different individual documents to email, I'll just screenshot this and send this. So they can see the event name, the date, which will be in their time zone, HST, and the local time, which will be my traveling time zone. Then in the remarks section, I can just write any other information, like a hotel address or a phone number. The next section is a boring section. So that's why they're combined, because I don't want two boring sections in this travel planner. It is the documents and costs section. I have some categories already listed here to get me started, but I will add and delete as needed. This is where I will upload all of the flight and hotel documents, like the receipts and the confirmations. So everything is in one place, and I will input the costs so I can add them up. Also, if we need to pay for an e-visa, I can input the cost and save the document in one place. At the top here, I have a note that reminds me to save all important docs on my iPhone. Basically, it's just kind of common sense. Have copies of important documents in multiple places, saved on my phone, on my husband's phone, my email, husband's email, another email, my iCloud, his iCloud, we get the idea. Packing list. We love a good packing list. So I'll usually check the weather closer to the trip, but while I'm in the initial planning stages, I will add bookmarks to AccuWeather because they have the monthly calendar set up super far in advance. So even if the trip is months away and there's no forecast yet, I can at least see the weather averages for that month. I have this handy little to buy toggle, just a place where I can note anything I want to pick up for the trip. So I can just press this button and I get a fresh packing list. This may look a little weird, but it makes sense for how I like to pack. Basically, I will get all of my kits together and packaged up in secure little bundles that will not fall apart. And then when that's done, I'll move into the packing section that instructs me on which bundle gets packed where, as if I don't already know. And I just appreciate the support because it lessens the mental load. I'll make a separate packing video going into more in depth about the packing list itself. But for every trip, I start with a list that is super comprehensive and perhaps a little bit excessive, honestly. Depending on the requirements for that particular trip, I'll just go through and delete things I can do without, or just make any adjustments. But I always have the same starting point, and that makes it easy to not worry that I forgot to add something. The final section is journals. This is where I will compile all of my journal entries from the trip. So what I have here is a linked view of my daily journal and agenda database, which is home to all of my daily agendas and journals, no matter where I was or what I was doing. But I still wanted to be able to see all of the journal entries from a particular trip in one place, in context with the trip. So what I did was I created a relation property between my daily agenda and journal database and my travel database, where all of these travel planner pages live. Then I just set up this linked view. I have it in gallery view, but I think list view would also look good for its simplicity. I have it filtered so that when I'm over in the daily database writing my journals, all I have to do is link the journal back to the trip page using the travel relation property, and everything will just show up here. This is what my daily journal and agenda database looks like. It is pretty simple. There's a page for each day, and if you scroll down, you can see that these pages are linked to the Japan trip that I went on recently. These are my templates. I have my daily agenda repeating now. Opening the travel journal template, this is what it looks like. At the top, I have the same linked database as in the daily agenda. It's filtered so that all of my calendar events on today's date show up in this easy to read list. Then I just have some empty space where I can type whatever comes to mind. Sometimes I write sentences and sometimes I write bullet points. It just depends. And these boxes are for adding photos with a little blurb for each one. I'm going to demonstrate what it looks like when I head back into the travel planner. So I'm going to create a page and use this travel relation to search for my trip page that I'm working on. Here it is. I'm also going to add a cover photo. I'm going to pick one from the gallery here, but usually I would upload my own photo. Now I can exit out of here and return back to the trip page. And now I have a linked journal entry. So that is everything in my Notion travel planner. I don't feel like it's overly complicated, but I feel like it has everything I need to feel organized. My Notion travel planner has gone through several thousand iterations to get to this point, and each time I feel like I learn a little bit more about my own preferences and what I'm willing to do. I've learned that having a dedicated trip hub was not going to be helpful if it felt overwhelming while I was planning and also overwhelming while I was on the trip. So for me, being able to just use the planner for what it is and have the ability to seamlessly migrate off of it is really what I needed to give me the motivation to use it in the first place. Because for a while, I had honestly just lost interest in using any travel planner, and I was just using like a notebook because I was like, what is the point? I'm not gonna look at this stuff later anyway. But I don't feel like that anymore, and now I'm actually excited to use my travel planner again. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I hope this inspires you to use Notion. Like, Notion is a really great tool. Like, I recommend it for everybody. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. And that is all for today. I will see you next time. Bye!